Have you ever wondered if, deep down, you're a bad person? What if all the kindness, all the politeness is just an act we put on to get by? This is one of the oldest questions we've ever asked ourselves. Are people born good? Or are we naturally selfish and mean? It's a question that has kept philosophers up at night for thousands of years, and it's something we all probably think about when we see the crazy things happening in the world. We see incredible acts of love and generosity, but we also see wars, cruelty, and people just being awful to each other for no real reason. So which one is the real us? Is our true nature something good that gets corrupted, or is it something dark that we have to constantly fight to keep under control? For the next little while, we're going to dive into this, and I promise you, the answer isn't what you think it is. Let's start by looking at the darker side of the argument. There's a pretty strong case to be made that humans, left to their own devices, are not very nice creatures at all. A long time ago, a thinker named Thomas Hobbes looked at the world and basically said that without rules, laws, and a strong government to keep us in line, our lives would be terrible. He famously described life in our natural state as nasty, brutish, and short. His whole idea was that we were all fundamentally selfish. We want what we want, and if there's nothing stopping us, we will step on whoever we need to get it. According to Hobbes, the only reason we form societies and agree to follow rules is out of fear. We agree not to hurt others because we don't want them to hurt us. It's a deal we make for our own survival, not because we're genuinely good people. It's a pretty depressing thought, isn't it? That all our niceness is just a thin blanket covering up a selfish beast that's just waiting to get what it wants. This idea that we're wired for selfishness didn't just stay in old philosophy books. It got a major update in the 20th century with science. You might have heard of the book The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. The main idea, put simply, is that we are just survival machines for our genes. Our bodies are basically vehicles, and our genes are the drivers. And what do these genes want? They just want to make copies of themselves and get into the next generation. So, from this point of view, any action we take can be traced back to what would be best for our genes to survive. When a mother risks her life for her child, it's not just pure love. It's her genes making sure their copies, which are in the child, survive. Even when we're kind to a stranger, some would argue it's a calculated move. Maybe we expect them to help us later, or maybe it makes us look good in the community, which increases our own chances of survival and finding a mate. It makes everything sound cold and calculated, as if our feelings of love and compassion are just tricks our genes play on us to get what they want. But it gets even more disturbing when you look at some of the experiments that have been done on actual people. Let's talk about the Milgram experiment. Back in the 1960s, a psychologist at Yale named Stanley Milgram wanted to understand how so many seemingly ordinary people could have taken part in the horrors of the Holocaust. He set up an experiment that was clever and honestly pretty terrifying. He brought in volunteers and told them they were part of a study on memory. There was another person in the room who the volunteer believed was another participant, but was actually an actor. The volunteer, called the teacher, would read out word pairs, and the learner had to remember them. If the learner got one wrong, the teacher was told to press a button that delivered an electric shock. The shock started small but got stronger with every wrong answer, going up to a level marked as a dangerous 450 volts. Now, the shocks weren't real, but the volunteer didn't know that. The actor would pretend to be in pain, screaming, complaining about a heart condition, and eventually falling silent as if he'd passed out, or worse. Before the experiment, Milgram asked other psychologists what they thought would happen. They predicted that almost no one would go all the way to the 450 volts shock. But that's not what happened. A shocking 2/3 of the volunteers, everyday people just like you and me, went all the way to the maximum voltage just because a guy in a lab coat told them to continue. They were clearly distressed, sweating and arguing, but most of them still kept pressing the button. This experiment suggests that under the right kind of pressure from an authority figure, most of us are capable of doing really terrible things to another person. If that's not enough to make you question things, there's the Stanford prison experiment. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo took a group of healthy, psychologically normal college students and randomly assigned them to be either prisoners or guards in a fake prison set up in the basement of Stanford University. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It had to be shut down after just 6 days. The students who were assigned to be guards quickly became cruel and abusive. They humiliated the prisoners, subjected them to psychological torture, and seemed to enjoy their power. The prisoners, in turn, became passive and helpless, some even having emotional breakdowns. These were just normal guys, but the power of the situation and the roles they were given seemed to completely change them, stripping away their normal personalities and turning them into monsters or victims. Zimbardo himself argued that this showed how easily we can be transformed by our environment. It suggests that maybe we don't have a fixed good or evil nature, but that the situation we're in can bring out the absolute worst in us. Now, it's only fair to say that both of these experiments have been criticized over the years. Some people say Milgram results weren't as clear-cut as he made them seem, and that Zimbardo might have pushed the guards to act the way they did. But even with these criticisms, the results are deeply unsettling. They force us to ask a really uncomfortable question. If these normal people could do these things, what would I do in that situation? So when you put it all together, the case for humanity being naturally selfish, or at least capable of great evil, looks pretty strong. You have the philosophical argument from Hobbes that we're just out for ourselves. You have the biological argument that we're just puppets of our selfish genes, and you have the psychological evidence from famous experiments showing that ordinary people can be made to do horrible things with just a little push. It's easy to look at all this and feel a bit hopeless about humanity. It seems like the bad side has all the evidence. It's like we're on trial, and the prosecution has just laid out a rock-solid case that we are guilty of being, at our core, fundamentally flawed. It paints a picture of a species that is constantly at war with its own dark impulses, where kindness is a weakness and cruelty is just around the corner waiting for the right moment. The question that hangs in the air is, if this is all true, if we are so wired for selfishness and cruelty, then how can we explain all the good in the world? Where does love come from? Why do people run into burning buildings to save strangers? Why do we feel compassion for others? If the case for our darkness is this strong, the case for our goodness must be even stronger to even stand a chance. And that's where the real mystery begins.
Think about the last time you saw a story on the news about a total stranger doing something heroic, someone jumping into freezing water to save a dog, or a group of people lifting a car off someone they don't even know. Why do they do that? If we're all just selfish animals trying to survive, then risking your own life for someone else makes absolutely zero sense. It's easy to get bogged down by all the evidence that seems to point to humans being fundamentally selfish. It's a powerful argument, and it's hard to ignore. But it's also just one side of a much bigger, more complicated story. What if I told you that our kindness, our empathy, and our desire to help each other aren't just a fake layer we put on top of our true nature? What if those things are just as deeply baked into who we are as our selfishness, maybe even more so? There's a whole other school of thought that turns the dark view of humanity completely on its head. It argues that we aren't born bad and corrupted, but that we're actually born good, with a natural leaning towards kindness and cooperation. Let's go back to the philosophers for a moment. For every Hobbes who thought we were nasty and brutish, there was someone like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau had a completely opposite view. He believed that humans in their natural state were like noble savages. He imagined that before we built big, complicated societies, we were peaceful, happy, and content. He argued that we are born with a natural feeling of compassion for others. We don't like to see others suffer, and it pains us. It's only when we start living in societies, he said, that things go wrong. Society introduces ideas like private property, which leads to jealousy, greed, and inequality. We start comparing ourselves to others, wanting what they have, and that's where the corruption begins. So for Rousseau, the evil we see in the world isn't coming from inside of us. It's something that our modern way of life has taught us. We're born good, and the world makes us bad. This is a much more hopeful idea, but is there actual proof for it? Well, what if we could look at humans before society has had much time to corrupt them? What if we could look at babies? Researchers have been doing exactly that, and what they found is pretty amazing. At places like Yale University's Infant Cognition Center, scientists have run clever experiments to see if babies have a sense of right and wrong. In one famous study, they showed babies as young as 6 months old a puppet show. In the show, one character, maybe a red circle, is trying to climb a hill. A good puppet, a yellow triangle, comes along and helps push the circle up the hill. Then, a bad puppet, a blue square, comes and pushes the circle back down. After the show, the researchers would offer both the helper puppet and the mean puppet to the baby. Over and over again, the babies overwhelmingly reached for the good, helpful puppet. They seemed to have a preference for the kind character and an aversion to the mean one. They did many variations of this, and the results kept pointing to the same thing. It seems we are born with some kind of basic moral compass already installed. We don't have to be taught to prefer kindness over cruelty. It's our default setting. It's pretty incredible to think that a 6-month-old baby who can't even talk yet is already making moral judgments. If you find this stuff as fascinating as I do and want to keep exploring these huge questions about who we are, it would mean a lot if you hit that subscribe button. That way you can keep up with everything we're diving into. So if even babies are leaning towards the good, where does this come from? Is there a biological reason for it? For a long time, the selfish gene idea made it hard to explain true altruism, that is, helping someone else at a cost to yourself with no expectation of getting something back. But more and more scientists are realizing that cooperation is one of the most powerful forces in evolution. Think about it. An animal alone in the wild is vulnerable, but a group of animals working together, they can watch out for predators, hunt bigger prey, and raise their young more safely. The groups that were best at cooperating were the ones that survived and passed on their genes. Humans are the ultimate example of this. We aren't the strongest, fastest, or toughest animals on the planet, not even close. Our superpower, the thing that allowed us to spread across the entire globe, is our ability to cooperate in huge numbers. Our societies, our cities, our technology, none of it would be possible without our intense ability to work together. So from this evolutionary point of view, being good to others isn't some weird fluke. It's a key survival strategy. The individuals that were wired for empathy, fairness, and teamwork were more likely to be accepted by the group and therefore more likely to survive and have kids. Selfishness can get you ahead in the short term, but in the long run, it's the cooperators who win. This deep-seated need to connect and cooperate is reflected in our own brains. Scientists have discovered something called mirror neurons. In the simplest terms, these are brain cells that fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we see someone else perform that same action. So if you see someone smile, the part of your brain that you use for smiling lights up a little bit, even if your face doesn't move. If you see someone get hurt and wince in pain, your brain mirrors that feeling of pain. It's like we have a built-in Wi-Fi system that allows us to feel a little piece of what someone else is feeling. This is believed to be the biological foundation of empathy. We are literally hardwired to feel each other's joy and pain. This isn't some high-level philosophical concept, it's a basic function of our brains. And you don't just see it in humans. Scientists like Franz de Waal have spent their lives studying our closest relatives like chimpanzees and bonobos. They've documented countless examples of animals showing what looks exactly like empathy, compassion, and a sense of fairness. Chimps will comfort another chimp who has lost a fight. Monkeys have been shown to protest and refuse to take a treat if they see another monkey not getting one for the same task. This suggests that the roots of our morality and our goodness are incredibly deep, going back millions of years before we were even human. So now we have a completely different picture. We have philosophers who believed in our innate goodness, we have psychological studies showing that babies have a built-in moral sense, and we have biological and evolutionary evidence suggesting that our brains are wired for empathy and our very survival as a species has depended on cooperation. This isn't just wishful thinking, it's a powerful case built on real scientific observation. It suggests that the desire to connect, to help, and to be fair isn't a weakness we have to overcome. It's our greatest strength. It's the secret sauce of our success. The darkness and selfishness are definitely part of us, there's no denying that. But this evidence shows with just as much force that the light is part of us too. It's not an act we put on, it's a fundamental piece of our programming. We are not just selfish beasts in a thin disguise. We are also, and perhaps more importantly, the most cooperative and empathetic creatures this planet has ever seen. That leaves us in a strange place, doesn't it? If both of these things are true, if we are born with the capacity for both incredible cruelty and incredible kindness, then what does that mean for us? Which one is the real us? So where does all this leave us? We're faced with a mountain of evidence for our dark side, a deep-seated selfishness, a chilling capacity for cruelty when ordered, a tendency to go along with the crowd even when it's wrong. And at the same time, we're faced with just as much evidence for a better nature, a biological wiring for empathy, an innate preference for kindness seen in literal babies, and a history that shows our greatest triumphs come from cooperation. It feels like a fundamental contradiction, a paradox baked into our very DNA. It's like trying to describe a fire by saying it's both freezing cold and burning hot. It doesn't make sense. We are left staring at two portraits of humanity that are both undeniably true yet completely opposed. Perhaps the real breakthrough comes when we stop trying to pick one portrait over the other. Maybe the problem is the question itself. For centuries, we've been asking, are humans good or evil? As if it's a multiple-choice question with only one right answer. What if the truth isn't an or, but an and? What if we are both? What if the real, more interesting question is, why did evolution make us so good at being both? The most compelling answer is that we didn't evolve to be saints or sinners. We evolved to be survivors. And to survive in a world as complex and dangerous as ours, our ancestors needed a flexible, adaptable toolkit. Our capacity for aggression, selfishness, and competition is one of those tools. And our capacity for empathy, cooperation, and self-sacrifice is another. They aren't two opposing forces in a cosmic battle for our soul. They are two different sets of strategies, and we deploy them based on one incredibly powerful, deeply ingrained mental switch: the idea of us versus them. This is the master key that unlocks the paradox. Our most profound acts of goodness and our most horrific acts of evil often spring from the very same source, our tribal nature. Think about who receives our kindness. We are incredibly good to the people inside our circle, our in-group. This is our family, our friends, our team, our tribe, our nation. For us, we can be breathtakingly altruistic. We feel empathy for them, we share with them, we work with them, we even risk our lives for them. This is our cooperative side in full display, the glue that has held human societies together for millennia. It's what allows us to build cities and create art. But the moment our brain categorizes someone as them, an outsider, a competitor, a threat, that entire system can shut down in an instant. The empathy evaporates. The instinct to cooperate is replaced by the instinct to compete or even to destroy. This single psychological mechanism explains almost every contradiction in our behavior. It explains how sports fans, who are perfectly pleasant people during the week, can scream vicious insults at other fans wearing a different colored jersey. It explains how nationalism can inspire both beautiful acts of community and ugly acts of hatred. It even helps explain the darkest chapters of human history, like the Rwandan genocide, where neighbors who had lived together peacefully for years were suddenly incited to see each other as a them, a cockroach, to be stamped out, leading to unimaginable slaughter. The same instinct that fosters love and community on one side can fuel dehumanization and violence on the other. Even our biology reflects this. The hormone oxytocin, often called the love hormone for its role in social bonding, strengthens our feelings of trust and empathy for our in-group. But some studies show it can also increase our suspicion and defensiveness toward outsiders. It's a bonding agent for us and a defense mechanism against them. Our good and our evil, then, are not separate things. They are two sides of the same tribal coin. But we are not stuck as prisoners of our biology. This is just our starting point, our factory settings. What truly defines us is what we do with that programming. Our capacity for good and evil is like having two wolves living inside of us, one of light and one of darkness. Our instincts alone don't decide which one wins. Our environment, our culture, and most importantly, our choices are what feed one wolf and starve the other. Our environment is a massive factor. If you put people in a situation of extreme scarcity and fear where they have to fight for basic resources to survive, you are feeding the dark wolf. Their circle of us will shrink dramatically, maybe just to their immediate family. They will become more suspicious, more defensive, more selfish. It's a natural survival response. But if you create an environment of safety, abundance, and interconnectedness, you feed the wolf of light. People's circles of concern expand. They can afford to be more generous, more trusting, and more cooperative. This is why the societies we build are so critically important. A system of justice based on rehabilitation brings out a different side of us than one based purely on punishment. An economic system that incentivizes collaboration produces a different kind of person than one that rewards ruthless, winner-take-all competition. The world we construct around ourselves acts as a constant nudge, pushing us to be our better or our worse selves. This is the true lesson of those troubling psychological experiments. They didn't prove we were evil. They proved that the situations we're put in have a tremendous power to influence which part of our nature comes to the surface. It's an idea Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil, the realization that most of the world's horrors were not committed by fanatics, but by ordinary people just accepting a system, following orders, and not thinking too hard about the consequences. And this leads to the final, most personal piece of the puzzle, the stories we tell ourselves. The reality we create is often a reflection of what we believe to be true. If we fundamentally believe that humans are selfish, lazy, and can't be trusted, we design systems that reflect that. We create workplaces with constant surveillance, we build communities with high walls, and we interact with each other with suspicion. In doing so, we create the very selfish behavior we expected from the start. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if we choose to believe that people are capable of goodness, that they want to contribute and connect, we can design systems that empower that side of our nature. We can build schools that teach cooperation alongside competition. We can create communities that value empathy. We can choose to see the humanity in others even when we disagree. The world we see is the world we build, and the world we build is based on the story we believe about ourselves. So in the end, the grand question of good versus evil doesn't have a single tidy answer because it's not a question about a fixed state of being. It's a question about a continuous act of becoming. The battle isn't out there between good people and bad people. It's inside each of us every day. As the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn concluded, after witnessing the worst humanity had to offer, the line separating good and evil doesn't run between countries or political parties, but passes right through every human heart. We all have that line inside of us. We are all a messy, complicated, and sometimes contradictory mix of light and dark. Being human isn't about being one or the other. It is about living with that tension, with that constant internal choice. It is not a flaw in our design. It is our design. The ultimate answer, then, is not a fact to be discovered, but a choice to be made, over and over again. It is the 1,000 tiny decisions we make every day, the choice to listen, to share, to forgive, to understand, to help. That is where the nature of humanity is truly decided.